He had built his empire on control, until a grieving billionaire discovered that the only person who could reach his silent child was a stranger he'd never have let past the door. She was just the babysitter, or so he thought. But one word, whispered in a language he'd never heard, would upend everything he believed about power, family, and who really gets to decide what's normal. The glass walls of William Grayson's penthouse caught every sunrise, every neon glint from Silicon Valley below, a 45th floor fortress built for winners, not for maybe. William liked control, or at least the look of it. His world ran on 5-year forecasts, on investment pitches crisp as a pressed shirt. But none of that mattered at 3:07 a.m., when his 2-year-old son screamed as if he'd swallowed all the sorrow in the world. There was no button for this, no solution in any of the binders crowding his desk. And for the 5th time in 3 months, another nanny, Harvard-educated, background-checked, discreet, had texted her resignation before dawn. The only sound now was the child's sobs, rising raw from the nursery, bouncing off marble and glass. The baby monitor blinked. William's coffee had gone cold hours ago. He'd lost count of the times he'd promised himself he wouldn't snap. But grief, when it's silent and sour, starts to taste like anger. It had been a year since Anna's funeral, a year of pitying looks at board meetings, a year of child psychologists, each with softer hands and more suggestions. Yet Theo, his son, hadn't spoken a word since his mother died. Not one, not even Dada. Sometimes William wondered if the boy would ever forgive him. Now the agency called. "She's the last candidate, Mr. Grayson, experienced with nonverbal children, excellent references." The recruiter's voice was steady, but William heard the message between the lines. Beggars, even rich ones, can't be choosers. William glanced at the resume on his laptop. Lauren Matthews. He saw the degrees, the references, the neat bullet points, and he saw the photo. He'd grown up in a world where people who looked like Lauren cleaned houses, not entered through the front door with contracts and keys. The thought made him uncomfortable, and then angrier at himself for being uncomfortable. He told himself he was a modern man, colorblind, progressive, but his world had rules, old ones, even if he didn't like to admit it. He forced his voice steady. "Chad, this is temporary. If she can't keep Theo calm, she's gone. No exotic stories, no alternative routines. I want stability." "Yes, sir," said the recruiter. "She understands." Lauren Matthews arrived that afternoon with quiet eyes and a simple, sturdy bag. She wore her hair in tight braids, a pressed navy blouse, no jewelry but a slim silver ring. Her handshake was firm. She didn't blink when William outlined his rules in a clipped, business-like tone. No strange food, no made-up fairy tales, no languages besides English. She nodded, listening, but her eyes flickered once, quick, unreadable. Theo, meanwhile, stared at her from behind William's leg, his thumb in his mouth, eyes wide and suspicious. The last nanny had tried to hug him on arrival. Lauren only knelt, palms open at a distance, and waited. For a long minute, they looked at each other. William cleared his throat, awkward. Lauren smiled, gentle. "Hello, Theo," she said softly. "It's nice to meet you." Theo didn't answer, but he didn't hide either. The first few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and silence. William watched from his office, through the glass that separated his work world from the one where his son floated, adrift. Lauren never raised her voice. She moved quietly, humming under her breath. Not English songs, something softer, foreign, more lullaby than lyric. Sometimes she tapped gentle rhythms on Theo's back when he woke screaming. Sometimes she whispered words William didn't understand. At first he bristled, but the boy's sobs grew shorter, his nights a little less broken. Still, the old routines held. Theo wouldn't speak, wouldn't smile. He just watched, solemn, like a child standing at the edge of a deep pool, waiting to see if the water was safe. William tried not to care about the details, about Lauren's soft singing in the hall, about how she brought little wooden animals and bright fabric squares instead of plastic, battery-powered toys. He tried not to care when the neighbors looked twice at Lauren, or when his business partner, after a brief visit, raised an eyebrow and said, "Interesting choice. You sure you know what you're doing?" "I don't have a choice," William snapped, sharper than he meant. But it was the truth. He was out of options, and maybe somewhere deep down, relieved to have an excuse. On the fourth night, it happened. William was in the kitchen, staring at a spreadsheet that meant nothing, when the baby monitor flickered with Theo's soft, uncertain cries. He saw Lauren cross the nursery floor, slow and patient, as always. She knelt beside Theo's crib, sang a few bars of the strange lullaby, and held out her arms. But then, something changed. Theo looked at her, really looked. Then, quietly, he reached for her hand and spoke a single clear word, soft but certain, "Novi." Lauren smiled, eyes shining with something William hadn't seen since Anna died. "Novi?" she whispered back. William froze. He stared at the monitor, replayed the moment twice, 3 times. He didn't know the word, but he knew what he'd seen. His son speaking. For the first time. He stumbled into the nursery, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt since the day he signed his first $100 million deal. "Theo, what did you say?" Theo, still clutching Lauren's fingers, only repeated it. "Novi. Novi." Lauren turned, calm but cautious. "He said Novi, Mr. Grayson." "What does that mean?" William's voice was tight, like he was bracing for bad news. "It means friend. It's from my mother's language. Yo. We speak it in Ghana." William didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to be furious, at the agency, at Lauren, at himself. Hadn't he made his rules clear? No confusion. No foreign distractions. But the other part, the father, not the CEO, saw the look on Theo's face. Saw the smile, shy but real, breaking through 2 years of silence. For the first time in months, William felt something inside him shift, a small crack in the armor he'd worn since Anna died. He watched his son, eyes wide with wonder, and realized he didn't know what to do. He did what men like him always did when faced with the unexplainable. He called an expert. The next morning, the living room became a makeshift observation deck. William's team, a pediatrician, a psychologist, a speech therapist flown in from Boston, sat quietly, jotting notes, watching Lauren and Theo. Lauren ignored the audience. She sang, she read, she knelt on the floor with Theo and his blocks. After an hour, the Harvard specialist closed his notebook. He's speaking, and he's communicating with her in a language that activates the emotional centers of the brain. It's not unusual. For some children, speech comes only when they feel absolutely safe. William listened, jaw tight. He'd hired the best. He'd bought all the right answers. Yet in the end, the key to his son's silence had come from a stranger's song, a language he couldn't pronounce. He waited until the house was quiet to confront Lauren. She stood in the hall, folding laundry, her movements slow, deliberate. "But you taught him that," he accused, his voice colder than he intended. I talk to him. He listens. He chose to speak. Why that word? Why not daddy or yes or something I understand? Lauren looked at him, steady, unafraid. The children choose the words that feel safe, Mr. Grayson. Sometimes those words come from the people who make them feel seen. He wanted to fire her right then, wanted to reclaim the control he'd built his life on. Instead, he found himself saying, "You'll stay until I find someone more appropriate." She nodded, expression unchanged. But as she turned back to her work, William caught a look, a mix of sadness and knowing. She'd heard it all before. That night, as the city pulsed below his window, William watched old baby videos. Anna's laughter, Theo's first steps, all the things that felt like they belonged to another world. He replayed the footage from the nursery, watched his son reach out, say Novi, smile at someone William barely knew. He realized for the first time that his son wasn't silent. He'd just been waiting for someone to listen in the right language, and the man who thought he could buy any solution had to face the fact that, for once, he was completely, achingly out of his depth. People think miracles sound like trumpets, a sudden thunderclap, or the swell of orchestral music on a movie night. But sometimes, miracles happen in the smallest voices. A child's first word in a foreign tongue, soft enough to make a billionaire freeze mid-step. For William Grayson, it felt like falling. 1 minute, the universe made sense. A tidy box with him at the top, money and logic as his anchors. The next, his son broke 2 years of silence with a word his father didn't recognize, smiling up at the new nanny as if she was the center of the world. William didn't know what to do with that. So as always, he reached for control. The morning after Theo's first word, the house woke up differently. William's phone buzzed with calendar alerts. Conference calls, an investor breakfast, a polite reminder from his legal team to review a new acquisition. He ignored all of it. He needed answers. He stood outside the nursery, arms folded, listening. Inside, Lauren sat on the carpet, legs crossed, surrounded by blocks, toy animals, and a handful of crumpled picture books. Theo was in her lap, tracing the lines of her palm with one small finger. Every so often he would whisper, "Novi, Esi, Novi," like a favorite song. William cleared his throat. What did he say? His voice startled both of them. Lauren looked up, calm. He's repeating words he remembers. It's good. He's practicing. But why not in English? William tried not to let his frustration show. He never said anything to me. Theo looked up then, big brown eyes searching his father's face, but he didn't speak. Lauren shrugged lightly. He speaks what he hears, what feels safe. Sometimes a new word is like a hand offered in the dark. It doesn't matter what language, if it means connection. The words stung more than William expected. He was about to press further when his phone buzzed again, this time from Dr. Whitley, the pediatric psychiatrist. "Did you get my video?" William texted back, "Yes, we need to talk." By noon, 3 specialists had arrived. Dr. Whitley from Harvard, a speech therapist from Stanford, and a private behavioral consultant whose retainer could buy a Tesla. They watched from behind the one-way glass in the playroom, murmuring in low, professional tones as Theo sang softly and stacked blocks. He barely noticed them. He was too busy handing Lauren a toy lion, babbling a stream of words, half English, half you. Dr. Whitley tapped his pen against his chin, then addressed William. "He's using language. That's a major breakthrough. The fact that it's not English doesn't matter. In fact, the switch means he feels secure enough to try." William scowled. But I hired you people to help him speak, to normalize him. The therapist shook her head gently. Language is about safety, not just vocabulary. He feels seen by Lauren. That's why it's working. William didn't want to hear it. He wanted a solution. He wanted the old life back, the one with Anna, where Theo's first words were supposed to be Dada or Mama, not something William had to Google. Later, in his office, William rewatched the nursery video for the 5th time. He turned up the volume, hoping for a clue, some hint that this was all just a trick of the microphone. But it was clear as daylight. Novi. Then a giggle. Then a wordless little song. William called the agency again. You didn't tell me she would... Mr. Grayson, with all respect, you said you needed results. Ms. Matthews has a track record with children who won't speak. But my son... He stopped. He didn't want to say what he really felt, that this was out of his hands. That evening, William summoned Lauren to his office. She came in quietly, closing the door behind her, eyes steady but cautious. He noticed, for the first time, the faint shadows under her eyes, the kind of exhaustion only people who cared too much ever carried. Did you teach him those words on purpose? William demanded, keeping his tone even. She shook her head. I speak to him, that's all. Children listen more than we think. Why you? She shrugged. It's my mother's language. It's how I learned to comfort. He likes the sound. It's new, so he tries. William hesitated. This isn't what I wanted. Lauren didn't flinch. No, but it's what he needed. The silence stretched. William found himself at a loss. His son was talking, but not to him. Not in a way William could reach. He should have fired her then. He almost did. But the memory of Theo's smile, that strange, effortless joy, was too rare. He found himself saying, You'll stay, for now, until I find someone more fitting. Lauren nodded. Whatever is best for Theo. She didn't sound angry, just tired. As she left, William watched her go, feeling the walls of his world tilt. In his mind, a question echoed, sharp and unwelcome. Why did my son have to go outside my world to find comfort? That night, William sat at the foot of his son's bed, watching Theo sleep. Soft breaths, little fists curled under his chin. He remembered Anna's voice, bright and laughing. Let him be who he is, not who you wish he'd be. For a long moment, William didn't feel like a CEO or a billionaire. He just felt like a man lost in the dark, hoping for a hand to find him. In the room next door, Lauren sang quietly, an old song in a language William still didn't understand, but that somehow seemed to make the whole house warmer. And for the first time, William wondered, if love could be measured, what language would it speak? There's always a moment when secrets, no matter how carefully buried, start to slip through the cracks. For William Grayson, that moment came not in a boardroom or behind a one-way mirror, but in front of 100 watchful strangers with crystal glasses in hand, and a silent little boy clinging to the only person who ever made him feel safe. The Grayson Foundation's annual gala was supposed to be flawless. William had spent weeks rehearsing his comeback. The newly minted widower, the devoted father, the CEO still in charge. Everything had to be perfect. The guest list stacked with senators and tech titans. The caterers prepped for gluten-free requests. The string quartet tuned to corporate acceptable classics. Even Theo was dressed in a tiny velvet jacket and bow tie, his dark curls smoothed, his face serious. William had asked Lauren to keep Theo in the nursery, away from the noise. She had nodded, but something in her eyes had been quietly stubborn. If he wants to say hello, I'll bring him for just a moment. William had agreed, barely listening. His mind was on donors, not on his son. The night shimmered with money and pretense. Conversations pulsed with the thrum of deals and the soft hiss of envy. William drifted through the crowd, smiling the way you learn to smile when you've lost everything except your reputation. But all at once, a ripple moved through the crowd, the kind of hush that signals trouble, or wonder, or both. He turned just in time to see Theo wriggle free from a matronly governess and dart into the ballroom, straight through a forest of silk dresses and tuxedo jackets, right to Lauren. The room seemed to hold its breath. Theo, usually silent in public, wrapped his arms around Lauren's legs and shouted, clear, insistent, and joyful, "Mama Essie!" The effect was electric. One senator actually spilled his champagne. Two investors exchanged a look of sharp calculation, the kind that had nothing to do with children. A PR manager's jaw went slack. William felt the ground tilt under him. He watched as Theo clung to Lauren, not to him, not to any blood relative, but to the woman he'd nearly fired twice. To the woman whose very presence, until recently, made William bristle with a shame he'd never admit. He heard the whispers. Is that the nanny? What did he just call her? Wasn't his wife the one with the Scandinavian last name? He called her Mama in front of everyone. The world's neatest lines, race, class, family, blurred and vanished in a heartbeat. After dinner, William locked himself in his study, eyes burning with humiliation and something worse, grief, raw and jagged, for all the moments he'd lost. He rewound the security footage over and over. Theo laughing, running, singing, not with him, but with Lauren. The evidence was undeniable. He wanted to blame someone. Lauren, for not keeping her distance. Himself, for ever letting his guard down. The world, for watching so eagerly. But as the footage played again, what caught him wasn't the words or the laughter. It was the look on Theo's face, unfiltered joy, a lightness William hadn't seen since Anna died. And every time it was Lauren who sparked it, Lauren who soothed him through night terrors, Lauren who taught him to trust again. The next morning, still sleepless, William stumbled into the playroom. He found Theo on the rug, singing softly to himself, building towers out of blocks. Beside him sat Lauren, reading aloud, her voice low and rhythmic. In her lap, Theo held two cards, one with the letter B, one with the letter E, English and U side by side. "How did you do this?" William asked, voice hoarse. Lauren paused. "He's always been ready. Someone just had to listen." She pulled a small business card from her pocket and handed it to him. William squinted at the lettering. Dr. Lauren Matthews, Ph.D. in Child Linguistics, University of Ghana. He read it twice. Then again, just to be sure. "Ph.D.? You're not just—" He stopped, embarrassed. She nodded, quietly proud but unsmiling. "I studied child language acquisition. I've published research. I came here because my brother needs expensive treatment in Accra. Babysitting paid better than academia, at least for now." William's head spun. He'd spent months treating her as a last resort. Just the help, just a stopgap. But she'd been a scientist all along. The woman he'd told not to teach any exotic words had 2 degrees and a reputation in her field. He closed his eyes, the shame sudden and sharp. "I was blind," he admitted softly. Lauren met his gaze, steady. "You just never looked past the surface." For the first time in months, William didn't have anything left to argue. He just stood there holding the card, feeling his world rearrange itself. He looked at Theo, at the child who, against every plan and policy, had found his own voice and chosen, with perfect clarity, whom to trust. Maybe that was the point. Maybe it was never about control. Maybe it was about letting go, long enough for a miracle to walk right into your home and speak your child's first word.